Mother, Loretta Young, did Call of the Wild. Well, the first time I knew who my father was, I was 23, and I was 2 weeks away from being married. And I said to my fiancé, I said, I can't marry you. I don't know who I am. And he smiled and he said, well, I know everything there is to know about you. He said, you're Clark Gable's daughter.
They were the ones who shattered what seemed untouchable friendship, marriage, and loyalty. Some stars whispered and touched their co-star's wife right on set the moment his back was turned. Others took advantage while a husband was busy entertaining guests to slip away with his wife into a private room. There were even those who dragged their friend's wife into a yacht cabin and locked the door behind them, while the husband stood just a few meters away completely unaware. These affairs were not moments of reckless impulse, but carefully arranged, hidden behind cash payment studio power and the silence bought from the press. So, which golden era stars slept with their co-stars' wives? How did they conceal it, and in the end, did they have to pay the price for what they had done? We're about to find out. 1. Steve McQueen, entangled in an affair with a colleague's wife. In the early days of their careers, Vic Damone and Steve McQueen were friends. They shared drinks at Musso and Frank, laughed about new films, expensive sports cars, and cross-country drives. But that brotherhood began to fracture on a night later known as the birth of scandal. A waiter at Cairo's, one of Los Angeles' most exclusive clubs, swore he saw McQueen and Neil Adams seated together in the VIP lounge for hours, giggling like lovers. A drummer at Macambo recalled Steve didn't hesitate to place his hand on her back. The way he looked at Neela. That wasn't how you look at your friend's wife. Rumors spread quickly. Vic Damone heard whispers but brushed them aside, telling a friend, "No, Steve's my buddy. Brothers don't do that to each other." But everything collapsed one evening in Beverly Hills. At a party filled with studio moguls, McQueen and Neil left together under the curious eyes of guests. Vic sat alone, glass trembling in his hand. Near midnight, he called McQueen. His voice was heavy, each word restrained. "I hope what I've heard is just lies. Because if not Steve, you won't want to see me at your door." On the other end, McQueen replied, slowly, almost defiantly, "Vic, man to man. You know how it is." Weeks later, Neela filed for divorce. Paparazzi snapped photos of her and McQueen holding hands on Malibu Beach. The Hollywood Reporter splashed the headline, "Couldn't they wait?" A young photographer admitted he once captured McQueen and Neela embracing backstage, but by morning, McQueen's men had arrived with a thick envelope and took the reel away. Their wedding came quickly. The public speculated about the true beginning of their love, but no one could deny McQueen's dangerous allure, the man who lived on the edge racing cars, illegally brawling in bars, and loving women recklessly. But marriage soon became a battlefield. In her memoir, Neela wrote that McQueen forced her to abandon her career while he continued late-night escapades with whiskey engines and other women. A waiter at Cairo's remembered one night Neela came looking for him only to find Steve sitting between two young beauties. She stood at the door, staring for a few seconds, then left without a word. Years later, McQueen remained McQueen rebellious magnetic, never at peace. Repeated betrayals, jealousy, and suffocating control eventually destroyed their marriage. In 1972, after more than a decade together, Neela filed for divorce. In her memoir, she wrote a chilling line, "Steve once broke another man's marriage to have me. And then he broke our marriage to lose me." If McQueen flaunted his affairs openly, Clint Eastwood sowed his scandals in the shadows of film sets where every glance and touch sparked whispers across Hollywood. And that story began in New Mexico, 1968. 2. Clark Gable. The secret love child, hidden for nearly 70 years. Hollywood in 1935 glittered like pure gold. The king of Hollywood, Clark Gable, was already the #1 star, trailed everywhere by reporters and adoring female fans. On paper, he was the model husband of Maria Franklin Gable. But behind the scenes, a shocking secret was taking shape, one that Hollywood would try to bury for nearly a century. That winter, Gable flew to Alaska to film Call of the Wild with Loretta Young, the green-eyed beauty with a voice as soft as velvet. In the freezing cold isolated on set, the two often stayed behind after filming, sipping hot cocoa and talking for hours. One lighting crew member recalled, "Once I saw them walk out of the prop tent near midnight, their hands brushing their eyes locked on each other. Not long after Loretta discovered she was pregnant. For a star at the height of her career and unmarried, it was a devastating blow. But worse still, the father of her child was the most famous man in America and still another woman's husband." The news reached MGM and the studio went into panic. President Louis B. Mayer called an emergency meeting in a locked room on Washington Boulevard. Slamming his fist on the table, his voice thundered, "If this gets out, Clark loses everything and the film dies before opening day." That very night, two MGM security men quietly entered Loretta's quarters, ordering her to pack and leave Alaska immediately. A guard later recalled, "She cried the entire way to the airport, repeating over and over, 'I don't want to leave like this.'" Loretta vanished from Hollywood as if into thin air. The press was told she was resting for her health, but in reality she slipped into a small California town into a secret maternity home. The baby girl's birth certificate listed the father as John Doe, but the handwriting suspiciously resembled Clark Gable's secretary. Worse still, a love letter from Gable to Loretta, written just before the birth nearly exploded into scandal. A young reporter stumbled upon the draft, but within hours, MGM men arrived, placed a thick envelope on his desk, and coldly said, "You saw nothing." The reporter later recalled, "I still remember the smell of burning paper as they set it aflame, but the words in that letter never left my memory." Months later, Loretta returned to Hollywood in a pristine white dress and gentle smile. She announced she had been away doing charity work and had adopted a baby girl. No one dared ask further, and the perfect cover story concealed the truth: it was her own daughter, fathered by Clark Gable. The secret remained locked away for nearly 70 years. Only after Loretta's death did her daughter discover an old wooden box containing love letters and a photo of Gable cradling her as a child. In an interview with ABC News, she confessed through tears, "I looked at that photo and knew instantly. Blood cannot be hidden. He and I, we share the same face." Hollywood erupted. It was dubbed the greatest cover-up in film history, where a studio wielded enough power to control the press, the police, and even a person's fate. But that was an era when kings were shielded at all costs. For Steve McQueen, however, things were different. Just one night was enough to make his scandal headline news. 3. Dean Martin, stealing a friend's wife and a shocking scandal. Next on the list, Dean Martin, Las Vegas, 1962, on stage at the Sands Hotel. Dean Martin crooned, "Everybody loves somebody," glass of whiskey in hand, bathed in warm golden light. But that night he wasn't singing to the crowd. His gaze cut through the haze of smoke and fixed on the VIP table where Elaine Rich, wife of legendary drummer Buddy Rich, sat alone. She never took her eyes off him, and Dean sang as if every word was meant for her. A longtime waiter recalled, "I worked at the Sands for 7 years. I'd never seen him focus on a single audience member like that. He looked at no one else, just her." Days later, Buddy and Dean shared a show. The tension was suffocating. Every time Dean sang, Buddy pounded the drums like steel, glancing at Elaine smiling in the front row. One spectator said, "The crowd wasn't there for the music, they were waiting to see if the two would explode right on stage." Rumors ignited when a paparazzo caught Dean and Elaine leaving the Sands at 1 a.m., entering the VIP elevator. Elaine wore the same silver dress and diamond necklace from earlier that night. The negatives never surfaced. Dean's manager bought them back the same night for the price of a brand new Cadillac. A Sands security guard swore he once saw Dean and Elaine vanish into a VIP suite while Buddy rehearsed next door. Before leaving, Dean slipped him $100 and whispered, "Tonight, you didn't see a thing." The whispers grew when Elaine coincidentally showed up backstage in Miami during Dean's tour. In the luggage hold, a maid found a suitcase marked ER, containing plane tickets from Las Vegas to Miami under Elaine Rich's name. Within minutes, one of Dean's notorious fixers snatched it and tore it to pieces. Soon after Elaine vanished from Vegas, the press claimed she was resting, but whispers suggested otherwise. She had gone to Tijuana, Mexico to take care of something. A hotel clerk said she arrived with a tall man in sunglasses, voice just like Dean's, but no one dared ask. A Mexican medical source confirmed a record under a false name. The same week Elaine disappeared, later mysteriously lost. The scandal escalated. One Rat Pack member warned Dean backstage, "You know, Buddy's got friends on the Vegas Council, right? Don't let a love song turn into a funeral march." Back in the U.S., Dean's wife, Jean Beeger, hurled a copy of Confidential with a blurry Elaine photo onto the table. Her voice was cold as steel. "Will you tell me, or do I have to hear it from Buddy?" Dean poured another drink, silent, neither confirming nor denying. But his eyes said it all. And if Dean Martin set Las Vegas whispering with one look on stage, Burt Lancaster left Hollywood gasping with a single kiss. Right after a premiere. 4. Clint Eastwood. An affair in plain sight on set. At noon on the Hang 'em High set in the New Mexico desert, the cast was chatting over coffee when suddenly chairs crashed, cups shattered. Everyone turned in shock. Veteran actor Pat Hingle, usually calm, was charging straight at Clint Eastwood, face-flushed finger jabbing the chest of Hollywood's man with no name. A lighting technician recalled, "I heard Pat shout, 'You think I don't know?' And Clint just stood there, eyes locked, like daring him." Minutes earlier, Pat's wife, Alice Faye, had left the set. Her presence had long raised questions. She wasn't in the film, yet she was there nearly every day. At first, people thought she was just visiting Pat, but gradually it became clear she spent more time near Clint's trailer than her husband's. A costume assistant remembered, between takes Alice would walk straight to Clint, hand him water, and they'd talk for ages. Once I saw her laughing so hard she bent over at something Clint said. Another time, the entire crew saw Clint and Alice drive off in his green Jeep. They disappeared for 2 hours, returning with the excuse of scouting locations. But that day, no location scouting had been scheduled. The fire spread when a freelance photographer captured Clint and Alice dining at a Mexican restaurant 20 kilometers away. 2 days later, his film vanished, traded for a thick envelope from Clint's men. Still, a blurry photo leaked, and in Santa Fe bars, whispers grew. If that picture had been clear, there'd be no denying it. The breaking point came that afternoon. Pat was rehearsing lines when he heard Alice was in Clint's trailer again. He stormed out and the confrontation exploded. Director Ted Post and 2 assistants had to hold both men back to prevent a brawl in the desert. Afterward, Pat changed completely. No greetings for Clint, no shared meals, and he demanded the director schedule scenes so they'd never appear together. The tabloids pounced. Confidential magazine ran a sly headline. The Hang 'em High set wasn't the only thing heating up. The article never named Alice, but Hollywood knew exactly who it meant. When filming wrapped, Clint stayed silent. Months later, Pat and Alice separated. Rumors spread that Pat considered suing Clint under alienation of affection laws, but withdrew, fearing press exposure. A friend of Pat revealed he said he'd never step into a room with Clint again, and he kept that vow for the rest of his life. 5. Robert Mitchum. The Savoy Night and the Revenge of a Forgotten Wife. In the world of British cinema in the late 1940s, Anne Todd was the symbol of elegance, the ice lady on screen, but in real life she was little more than a shadow in the life of famed director David Lean. Close friends whispered that their marriage was like one of Lean's own films, visually perfect yet emotionally cold. An actress who once worked with Anne said she could memorize every line of a script, but she couldn't remember the last time her husband told her, "I miss you." In the autumn of 1949, Robert Mitchum arrived in London to discuss a US-UK film project. Fresh off an arrest for marijuana back in America, the press had dubbed him Hollywood's dangerous man, handsome enough to win your trust, reckless enough to cost you everything. They met at a lavish rank organization party at the Savoy Hotel. Amid the clinking of glasses and golden light, Mitchum leaned over to Anne's table and said, "Don't you find the champagne here rather dull? I know a place with better drinks where no one will call out your name like they're reading off a guest list." Anne laughed, a rare reaction that her friends later admitted we hadn't seen from her in years. In the days that followed, Mitchum and Anne were spotted several times at a small Soho bar where jazz mixed with cigarette smoke and 12-year-old whiskey. A jazz musician recalled, "They always sat at the corner table. Anne would take off her gloves and let Mitchum hold her hand. For a woman like her, that meant more than any public kiss." The fateful night came after a late party. At 1 a.m., they slipped out the Savoy's side door, avoiding the reporters in the main lobby. A taxi driver who picked them up remembered clearly Mitchum handed him $20 a fortune at the time and whispered, "You'll forget we were ever in this cab, won't you?" He drove them to a rented Mayfair flat where the lights didn't go out until nearly 4 a.m. When they returned, they chose the staff elevator instead of the main one. A night guard recalled he was still in his suit tie, crooked. Her hair was messy, eyes shining. Mitchum grinned at me and said, "No need for more champagne tonight, we've had plenty." Rumors exploded within days. Lean learned the truth within 48 hours, not from the papers but from whispers at a British Film Institute gathering. He never made a scene, but soon after Mitchum was dropped from a $2 million project. Officially, it was scheduling conflicts, but a producer close to Lean was blunt. "In London, if David Lean doesn't want you working, you don't work. Period." The British tabloids pounced. The Daily Mirror ran the headline, "The Ice Queen and Hollywood's Bad Boy," and published a blurry photo of Anne and Mitchum at Ascot. A Daily Express journalist claimed to have seen them together at a Bond Street jeweler. No one knew what was purchased, but rumors spread of a $500 diamond bracelet Mitchum had given her. Within a year, Mitchum was quietly blacklisted from US-UK collaborations. In America, his bad boy image turned into the marriage wrecker. One paper published a list of 5 stars you shouldn't leave alone with your wife, with Mitchum at the top. Hollywood friends claimed some directors even added no Mitchum clauses to parties if wives or girlfriends would be present. The scandal cost Mitchum millions and left a lasting scar. But it also revealed a harsh truth. Sometimes an affair wasn't just weakness, but the desperate cry of a wife forgotten for too long. And before the London storm had calmed, Hollywood was rocked by another blow. Gary Cooper suddenly appeared in shocking, intimate photos, and the woman in them was most certainly not his wife. 6. Burt Lancaster. The Betrayal, Kiss After the Premiere. Los Angeles, September 1955. The premiere of The Kentuckian at Grauman's Chinese Theater was not just a film debut, it was a showcase of the Hecht Hill Lancaster empire founded by Burt Lancaster and his longtime partner, Harold Hecht. Neon lit up Hollywood Boulevard, reporters swarmed stars dazzled in satin gowns. Burt strode down the red carpet, his smile frozen on every magazine cover, shaking hands like he owned the night. But after the applause faded and the audience dispersed, a scene in the side lobby left witnesses breathless. Burt stood with Gloria Hecht, Harold's wife. She glowed in a turquoise satin gown, diamonds sparkling at her throat. At first, they leaned close, whispering. Then Burt placed his hand on her back, leaned in, and kissed her. Slowly, deliberately. A photographer from the Los Angeles Mirror recalled, "I thought they'd pull away when the flash went off. But no. They just stood there like they wanted me to capture it." The problem was, this was no rumor. Harold was only a few yards away, entertaining guests completely unaware. An extra from the Kentuckian remembered someone whispered, "That's Harold's wife." I turned and saw reporters' faces turn red. They knew they'd just struck gold. The next morning, Hollywood Whispers headlined Burt Lancaster's off-screen kiss sets the red carpet ablaze. Soon after, word reached Harold. A production aide revealed Harold smashed his glass and muttered, "He played me." And on our own night. Consequences came fast. A $2 million international film deal Burt had just secured was abruptly canceled, partners unwilling to tie their star to scandal. Harold, though not openly cutting ties, began excluding Burt from strategy meetings, signing projects without his name. In industry whispers, Hecht Hill Lancaster was no longer the power trio, but two men hand in hand, and one left behind. The story became a cautionary tale. One kiss at the wrong time with the wrong woman could shatter a decade-long friendship and shake an entire career. The crowd at Grauman's was still buzzing over Burt Lancaster's scandal when, in a walled Beverly Hills mansion, another storm was brewing, this time involving the wife of a legendary director, A Night with Robert Mitchum, and by morning, all of Hollywood buzzing like a hive torn open. 7. Gary Cooper. Intimate photos with a friend's wife, up for sale. In early 1950s Beverly Hills, few couples were as admired as Gary Merrill and his wife Veronica Balfe. They were elegant, wealthy, and most notably extremely close to Gary Cooper. The three were often seen dining together at Frank Sinatra's parties or vacationing at Cooper's Montana ranch. To the public, they were Hollywood's extended family, glamorous and carefree. But insiders had a saying, "Here, any party can be the start of a divorce." And the Cooper-Merrill scandal proved it true. According to a former waiter at Mocambo nightclub one spring night in 1951, Merrill left the table to take a studio call. Cooper and Veronica stayed behind, ordering a rare scotch. When Merrill returned, he saw Cooper leaning close, whispering something that made Veronica blush and laugh. He froze at the doorway for a moment, then walked away as if he hadn't seen it, the waiter recalled. Rumors grew from such moments, but they erupted during a Palm Springs trip weeks later. A confidential paparazzo trailing Cooper for horse racing photos instead captured him and Veronica walking hand in hand down Tahquitz Canyon Drive before slipping into a bar called the Desert Rose. In the corner, they shared a single amber cocktail. He kissed her hand before they left. "I knew I'd struck gold," the photographer said. The photo went underground with a starting price of $200. Within 3 days, bids soared to $6,000 a fortune. Then, because in another shot, the blurred figure of an A-list actor appeared at the next table, offering even juicier angles. Paramount scrambled to buy it back, but Confidential had already sealed the deal for a special issue. When the photo hit the cover, Beverly Hills exploded. But the bigger shock came a week later when the Los Angeles Mirror published pictures of Gary Merrill hand in hand with a young nightclub singer leaving the Beverly Hills Hotel at dawn. Gossip columns called it the double scandal and described it as Hollywood's fastest counterstrike. The peak came when Cooper's wife, Veronica Rocky Balfe, broke her silence in a Hollywood Reporter interview. "I'm not surprised, but I am disappointed because he knows exactly the price of betraying a close friend." Career repercussions came immediately. Cooper was dropped from a $3 million Western he was set to headline. The director bluntly told a meeting, "I don't want audiences booing my leading man at the premiere." Public opinion split into one side, furious, calling him the man who shot the wrong heart, while female fans sent hundreds of letters defending him as a private matter. Talk shows like The Jack Paar Show turned the scandal into a running joke. High society parties coined him a new nickname, the Palm Springs Betrayer. From the model gentleman of the West, Gary Cooper emerged from the storm with a new reputation: attractive, dangerous, and unwelcome at any gathering where marriages needed protecting. But just as Hollywood was still buzzing about landlocked betrayal, the spotlight shifted offshore to Errol Flynn barrels of rum and locked yacht cabins that would ignite an even fiercer storm. 8. Errol Flynn scandal at sea. Errol Flynn, Hollywood's notorious womanizer, treated his yacht Zaka as his private stage for luxury living and pleasures that the press only heard about through rumors. In the summer of 1948, he scrawled out invitations with sly hints to a handful of friends, young starlets, and notably Barbara Payton, the wife of actor Franchot Tone, once both co-star and drinking buddy of Flynn. The note simply read, "There's always room on Zaka for those who need a breath of freedom." But in Hollywood, Flynn's freedom meant cold champagne jazz poker games on deck and cabin doors that locked from the inside. The trip launched from Miami, bound for the Caribbean. Everything seemed like just another party until the yacht docked at St. Thomas. A confidential reporter disguised as dock staff snapped Flynn and Barbara sitting close on deck, his arm around her waist, their lips inches apart. The rum glasses still foamed. Barbara's head rested on Flynn's shoulder as though the world had vanished. When the photo hit Confidential with the headline, "Sunset for her marriage," the media storm exploded. But that was just the surface. A crewman later revealed that one night after heavy drinking, Flynn and Franco Tone, who had flown in privately to visit his wife, erupted in a furious fight on deck. Tone's sudden punch sent Flynn crashing into a poker table, scattering whiskey and cards. Sailors had to intervene, but the quarrel drew the attention of the St. Thomas Coast Guard. At 2 a.m., officers boarded to take statements. Flynn smirked throughout. Tone insisted on filing a report accusing Flynn of luring a married woman. In the end, neither was arrested. They agreed to settle privately, but word of the brawl leaked, feeding the tabloids. Worse, when Barbara later hinted in a dockside interview that she had been led astray, Flynn was saddled with whispers of coercion. Though she never pressed charges, that remark alone doubled insurance premiums for any film hiring him. Tone filed for legal separation immediately after returning to Los Angeles. A friend recalled Franco said he didn't need explanations. The photo and the bruise were enough. The fallout spiraled. Miami and Havana yacht clubs blacklisted Flynn, fearing paparazzi chaos. His ex-wife, Lily Demita, quipped in Variety, "He's never sailed alone in his life, trust me." A new Flynn film's European release was postponed indefinitely, distributors wary of backlash. Meanwhile, rumors swirled of a passenger logbook hidden in Zaka's safe where Flynn supposedly listed special guests with coded marks for those who had crossed the line. After Barbara Payton, reporters hunted for the book as if it held the keys to all of Flynn's affairs, but it was never found. Hollywood was still abuzz over the punch, the photo, and the mysterious ledger when another scandal began brewing on land. Eddie Fisher was ready to abandon his marriage for another woman, a choice that would dominate headlines for months. 9. Eddie Fisher. Willing to leave his wife for another woman. In the late 1950s, Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds were Hollywood's golden couple. He was the charming crooner with a voice that melted hearts. She was the sweet star of Singin' in the Rain, America's Sweetheart. Married with 2 children, they graced magazine covers with radiant smiles like a Christmas card come to life. To the public, they were a fairy tale romance. But behind the curtain, the story was headed somewhere unthinkable. In 1958, famed producer Mike Todd, Elizabeth Taylor's husband and a close friend of both Eddie and Debbie, died in a plane crash. Elizabeth was devastated. Eddie, as a mutual friend, spent more and more time comforting her. At first, Debbie believed he was just doing his duty. But within months, the truth began to leak. At New York's airport one evening, photographers caught Eddie and Elizabeth hand in hand, gazing at each other with intimate warmth as if the world around them didn't exist. When the New York Daily News ran the front-page headline, "From friend's arms to husband's arms, America exploded," Debbie Reynolds only learned the truth through radio. Years later, she recalled, "I heard the announcer read the news, and my heart stopped. I held my children and wondered, where is their father?" Weeks later, Confidential dropped the next bomb, a leaked recording of Eddie and Elizabeth in a studio. In it, Eddie said, "Debbie is the image the public adores, but you're everything to me. I can't go back." The tape, sold by a technician for $15,000, a fortune, then spread nationwide. Public outrage was immediate. Clubs canceled Eddie's shows. Sponsors cut contracts. A live TV program struck him from the lineup just 48 hours before airtime. Frank Sinatra, once calling Fisher "my kid brother," canceled their joint tour, telling reporters, "I won't work with a man I can't trust." Even the Catholic Church spoke out. As both Eddie and Elizabeth were members, their parish priest barred Eddie from public mass, calling him a scandalous example. The breaking point came at a Beverly Hills charity gala. Eddie and Elizabeth entered hand in hand directly facing Debbie. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Debbie stood tall lips, tight eyes locked on Eddie. He bowed his head but never let go of Elizabeth's hand. The next morning, that image blanketed the nation's front pages, the betrayal of the century. Months later, Eddie's love letters to Elizabeth leaked. In them, he called her as beautiful as Cleopatra and confessed that Debbie never made me feel alive the way you do. Debbie filed for divorce. In her petition, she wrote, "I only wish he had the courage to tell the truth before letting the whole world tell it for him." Eddie never apologized. Years later in his memoir, he insisted, "I don't regret it. My love for Elizabeth was stronger than any public image." But the public never forgave. His career never recovered, and the Fisher-Reynolds-Taylor saga remains one of Hollywood's most infamous scandals. Even as this storm raged, another legend of stage and screen was about to ignite a scandal of his own, Dick Van Dyke, whose actions would shatter both a family and a 20-year friendship. 10. Dick Van Dyke, destroying both a family and a 20-year friendship. In the summer of 1979, Beverly Hills was alive with glittering after-parties where directors, actors, and stars gathered after long shooting days. That evening, at the lavish mansion of a powerful director, Maury Amsterdam, longtime friend of Dick Van Dyke, hosted a private party for his new film crew. Van Dyke's name was not on the guest list. Yet midway through the music and chatter, he appeared unexpectedly with a few companions. At first, everyone thought it was a cheerful surprise. But within half an hour, Van Dyke had drifted away from the group toward a striking young actress who happened to be Maury's wife. They whispered and laughed in a corner, then suddenly slipped inside the house. 20 minutes later, they re-emerged before the crowd clothes slightly rumpled her hair tousled as if caught in a sudden wind. No one knew a covert photographer was present posing as a waiter camera hidden beneath a serving tray. The before and after photos quickly sold to Confidential magazine for a record sum splashed with the mocking headline, "Mary Poppins Man and the Strange Wind Behind Closed Doors." The fallout was immediate. The very next day, Margie Willett, Van Dyke's wife, filed for divorce. As evidence, she produced a hotel receipt from Malibu dated the same night. On Good Morning America, her voice trembling but firm, she declared, "I recognized that perfume right away, it wasn't mine. And I realized Dick's clumsy lies were only covering a truth everyone could already see." Her words ignited the scandal like gasoline on fire. Late-night shows staged parody trials mocking Van Dyke with comic actors playing him amid laughter and jeers. The shockwaves hit harder within Hollywood itself. Friends turned their backs. Mary Tyler Moore, Carl Reiner, and several Broadway colleagues canceled projects citing incompatibility with the family-friendly image Hollywood was then desperate to project. Producers quietly crossed his name off casting lists, fearing public backlash. Van Dyke held a press conference to apologize, but began with the baffling line, "I only wanted to bring joy to people, even off-screen." The press tore it apart. The phrase was reprinted everywhere, becoming a punchline on comedy shows. Though Van Dyke continued acting, his wholesome image was permanently cracked. And every time he appeared live, questions about the party of '79 resurfaced, often pushing him to the edge of losing his temper on air. And so came the scandals of stars who slept with their co-stars' wives, scandals that shook Golden Age Hollywood, tearing apart not only marriages, but friendships and reputations. Whether star or ordinary man betrayal is betrayal, and the price is never cheap. What do you think of these stories? Which name shocked you the most, and can fame ever excuse such wrongdoing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to uncover more dark secrets behind Hollywood's shining lights.